Everything I do, I learned how to do on YouTube. Of course, Mobile Tech definitely knows what he's talking about. Oh, and also you can watch my channel, I guess. Maybe like and subscribe. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, in Season 1 we completed this 1968 Playmore Model 140. In Season 2 we've been working through a renovation of a 1956 Calcraft, and we're getting to the point where we're about ready to stand the walls up and start making it look like a camper again. So the other day in our stories we did an Ask Me Anything, so we thought in this video we would real quick just answer some of the questions that you had for us regarding renovating these old campers. Yeah, that's pretty good. To start off, one of the questions we got was, how do you calculate how many batteries you need? Well, for us, we calculated it at 0 batteries. I am planning a battery on our 56 Calcraft that we're working on now, but in this one, I didn't do it. So I'm probably not the best person to ask how to calculate that, but the simple answer is round up all the appliances and stuff that you think you're going to be running. You want to find out how many amps they draw and how long you think you're going to be running them, and calculate it from that. So of course we also have a camper photo booth, and one of the questions we got asked was, what kind of outlets do we use in there? Well, we can probably go sneak in there and take a look. There we go. Okay, here we are. The photo booth is really pretty simple. There's no batteries on board because we never operate it without it being plugged in. That's just part of our contract. You gotta offer us some kind of plug-in. So we've just got standard 110 outlets. There's one back here down by the floor. There's another one back here underneath the window. And there's one right here on the wall. And that's actually a regular outlet with just one of these little 6-way adapters on it. I don't plug that much stuff in here, but I needed a little space between my things so that I could get some power blocks on it. So I always kind of wished we would have installed a 12-volt system in here just so I could have some lights when I'm not plugged in, but pretty neat. And that's it. We kept it real simple. Okay, so another question we got about electrical was, how much did it cost for us to run all the wiring, the lights, all that stuff? And, honestly, I don't have a good cost figure for that because some of the stuff we had, some of the stuff we reused. We were able to reuse our original breaker box in this camper. I reused, I think, a couple of the outlets that had obviously been added at a later date. So really all I had to buy was some boxes and the power converter box and some few other odds and ends. The electrical system in a camper can vary widely depending on how complicated you want to get with it. If you're going to want to do solar and all that stuff, you're going to wind up spending a lot of money. But if you just want to keep it simple, do like a breaker box, a few outlets, wire up a fan, stuff like that, you're probably going to come in, I don't know, under $500 unless you need a really heavy-duty electrical system. Also, where we didn't have batteries in here, it was pretty easy to do. So we were asked, how do you change a light fixture? Well, it's pretty simple. A couple things to keep in mind. Generally, your lights on an RV are a 12-volt system, not a 120 like in your home. So if you buy a light that's just made for an RV, you just take the other one off, put the new one on. If you're going to use a household fixture, you need to either make sure you have a switch for it, because RVs don't generally have a light switch, or you need to add a switch to it, which is pretty easy to do. Loads of tutorials online to show you how to do that. And then you want to make sure you have a 12-volt bulb in it. The other thing to remember is because your walls and ceiling are not very thick, you're going to need to have a surface mount light, so you don't want anything that's going to require you to mount it in a electrical box like a lot of in-home lights. But other than that, pretty simple to do. So another question we got asked was, how do you wire trailer lights? Well, it's really pretty simple. It's one of the more simple things you're going to do on your camper, but your most basic kit, assuming you don't have trailer brakes and an auxiliary system and all that other stuff, but your most basic kit is going to be a 4-way system. and those are essential. You need all of those. But you'll have a left turn, a right turn. You'll have your running lights, or your tail lights if you want to call them that, and then you'll have a ground. Yeah, that's it. You just wire them up. Those go to your turn signals. That goes to your tail lights. That goes to your chassis frame. The one thing I'll say about that is that typically your light fixtures are meant to ground through the trailer skin, and I've never felt that that is a very good system to count on. You know, you can get a lot of ground issues that way, and 90% of your trailer wiring issues are ground issues. So I always run separate ground wire to each light fixture and attach it to whatever grounding surface is in there, and that way I know there's always a ground that's going to be connected all the way through it. I also, when I'm running my trailer wiring, a lot of times originally it ran through the wall. Well, if it runs through the wall and something goes wrong with it, the only way to fix it is to take the skin off to access it, which in a lot of cases can be really time consuming. So I like to run the trailer wiring through the interior cabinetry. It's all enclosed. It's, you know, it's maybe not immediately accessible, but it is much more accessible than if it were actually in your walls, and it's nice and protected from the elements that way. So those are just a couple things I do. Don't know if it's 100% necessary to do things that way, but I feel good about it. I know a lot of people struggle with trailer wiring. You know, sometimes it's because you're trying to reuse what was originally there, and I think it's better to replace that with new if it's been sitting for 60 years or so. So we got some questions about our interior as well, and one of the questions was in regards to rebuilding it, how did I optimize the weight distribution on the new cabinetry? Well, I didn't. Essentially, I just used common sense. I was more or less rebuilding things pretty similar to how they were originally in here. So, you know, all the actual weight distribution was more or less worked out, you know, 60 years ago when they originally built the camper. But that is definitely something you want to take into consideration if you're planning on doing a major renovation in one of these. You don't want to change the interior so much, you know, or add a bunch of heavy battery banks, or add, you know, water tanks where they didn't used to be, if you're not going to offset that weight elsewhere. So I tried to keep most of what I added over the axle or just in front of it. If you make a trailer very rear heavy, you can run into a very dangerous trailer sway situation. So you do really want to be careful about how you're loading things up in here. And then when we take it out to camp, I also, you know, try to, any load that I'm carrying in here, I try to carry it here in this middle section. But, you know, another point on rebuilding these, I see a lot of people that really, I think, overbuild the internal structure in these. If you're building a new bed frame, sure, it's nice to have a nice heavy-duty support, but trust me, folks, you don't need to be sleeping on 2x4s. You probably don't even need to be sleeping on 2x2s. So try to use lighter weight wood where you can, where it's not 100% necessary. I've been asked this a few times, and I know I've seen this in a lot of trailer forums online. It's, where do you find decent wood to frame your camper out with? Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's. You know, they all have some really cheap stuff, and they all have some decent stuff. If you're looking for really high quality plywood, if you can find marine grade plywood or Baltic birch. Baltic refers to the manufacturing process, not necessarily the location in which it's grown. But those tend to be your much higher grade plywoods. They'll look nicer if you're going to be showing off the wood, you're going to leave it exposed or something like that. Those are going to be nicer. But when it comes to getting studs and things for building like your walls or even, you know, parts of your cabinets, buy higher grade 2x4s or 2x6s, whatever, and rip them down on a table saw to the size that you need. The other thing to say about that is that if you're relying on replacing something by going to the hardware store and buying something that's the exact same size, don't count on it. Size standards have changed over the years. It's just highly unlikely that it's going to be a perfect match. So you're going to be ripping it down anyway or something like that. Start with higher quality wood, rip it down yourself. you'll be in a lot better shape in the long run. In that same vein, what type of wood did you use on the interior? Well, I used a few different types, but it's mostly birch plywood. I didn't really use Baltic birch in here because I knew from the get-go we were painting everything, so it didn't have to be that real high quality, real fine, nice stuff. But the walls are just 1/4-inch birch plywood from Home Depot. They seem to usually have the best quality, inexpensive plywood. The roof is actually 1/8-inch oak plywood, which I got at Sutherland's, but they've been out of it lately, so on the new one I'm using what is called an 1/8-inch utility panel, and you can also get those at Home Depot, and they're pretty inexpensive and they take a curve really nice and easily. Not the prettiest wood, but if you're going to paint it, it's not a big thing. If you're used to how cabinets are built in a home, they're usually built out of 3/4-inch plywood, and so they're really heavy, really dense. They feel really fancy. You don't really need to use 3/4 plywood for anything in your camper other than maybe the floor. But again, I usually say don't change something from original unless you have a really good reason to do it. So this one was actually 1/2-inch plywood on the floor, so that's what we used on that. But the cabinets are mostly made out of 1/2-inch plywood for carrying loads, and then tied together with some studs faced with 1/4-inch plywood. It doesn't need to be heavy, it just needs to be relatively sturdy, but where all these cabinets kind of tie together, they all kind of support each other, so you can get away with some lighter weight stuff. And honestly, in your house, you could probably get away with 1/2-inch plywood on your cabinets there as well. If you've been following along with our channel for very long, you might remember how much fun I had working on these windows. Another day, another window pane. And I still have a few problems that I need to sort out. I get asked every now and then, and I've seen asked in a lot of trailer forums, where do you get the seals to fix up these older windows? I've bought all of them at vintagetrailergaskets.com, but you might be able to find some locally at whatever RV parts supplier you have near you. And there's other places online where you can get them. But vintagetrailergaskets.com, they know what they're doing. They've got a lot of resources on that web page, and their prices are really pretty reasonable. So that's my go-to. I don't really have any reason to find anywhere else. I've been happy with them. Another question I got asked was, can you fix a leak on a jalousie window without removing it from the camper? And my answer is maybe. Depends on why it's leaking. If it's leaking because one of these panes of glass is broken, yeah, you can fix that without pulling it out. You just undo these screws on the side of it, on both sides, and then this pane will come out. You can take it apart and fix that window pane and put it back in. No big deal. The thing is, if you're getting water leaking through one of these and it's not because you've been driving 60 miles an hour in a rainstorm, it's probably because these screws along the top are leaking and you need to pull it off to add butyl tape to it. There's a few other ways that they could be leaking, but virtually all the reasons why you might get a leak from one of these involves taking the window out, fixing the window, resealing it with butyl tape, and reinstalling it. So one point I'll make about removing one of these is that when you've taken it out, you have a bunch of screw holes in the wood framing that's in there. And a lot of times when you go to screw it back in, your screws might be kind of loose in there. So you might want to use a larger size screw to replace it, but I don't really like that idea because then you're just getting, you're making holes bigger, and I don't think that's a good idea. So what I would recommend is before you put this back in, get a little tiny dowel or some kind of stick, put some glue on it, drive it into each one of those screw holes, cut it off flush, then put your window up, put your screws back in. Having that extra wood in it will let those screws bite into it again and give you a nice strong grip on that window and pull it tight against the camper. Another question we get fairly frequently is, how do you strip the paint off and how do you patch a hole? Well, stripping paint is pretty simple. It's just time consuming. We used a product called Aircraft Stripper. You can actually buy it at AutoZone or O'Reilly's. Usually auto parts stores have it. and not hardware stores. I'm not entirely certain what the reason there is. But then you just paint it on, wait a little bit, wipe it off. Definitely wear gloves because it's kind of caustic, and work outside because you don't want to breathe those vapors in. How do you patch holes? Things like Bondo don't work super well. They're okay if you have a really small hole, but because of the flexibility and thinness of aluminum, it's not ideal. So we had a couple of water inlets on the driver's side of the camper that we didn't want anymore. So what I did to seal them is I just cut a little aluminum patch and backed it with butyl tape and screwed it in about every 1.5 inches or so, and then painted it over. You're going to see the patch, but as long as you make sure everything's nice and square and all your cuts are nice and clean and your screws are nicely spaced out, it doesn't look unattractive. And that butyl tape works pretty well for sealing it up. So another person asked if I had any recommended book resources for renovating vintage campers like this, and honestly, I don't. There's a book that I've seen several people refer to in some of the trailer groups that I'm a part of, but I've never read it, and I don't really know how good it is. I've heard other people say it's really basic and it's kind of just common sense stuff, so I'm not going to recommend it. What I would recommend is joining, some Facebook groups devoted to trailer renovation. You can even find groups potentially specifically related to your specific vintage camper. There's a Playmore group on Facebook. There's definitely Airstream groups, of course. Aristocrats, Shastas, they all have their own devotees and fans. So those are probably the best places to go and get information. Also YouTube. Everything I do, I learned how to do on YouTube. Of course, Mobile Tech is the YouTube channel that everybody recommends. A lot of knowledge there. He's definitely knows what he's talking about. Oh, and also you can watch my channel, I guess. Maybe like and subscribe. Who's to say? And another question that I've been getting asked, feels like more and more lately, but can I bring my camper to you and have you fix it for me? Well, first of all, thank you. I'm flattered. But second of all, if I had a nice climate-controlled indoor work area, I would say maybe. But yeah, I don't think I want to take on any real paying jobs working in my backyard under a $120 tarp. But honestly, this is not my full-time job. This is just something I was kind of into that sort of dovetailed with, our camper photo booth and stuff like that. And, during the pandemic, I had some extra time, and so I was able to devote some extra time to working on my hobby. It's a little harder for me to maintain it now that I'm back to work. But the other part of that question was, how long does it take to do a reno like this? And I'm trying to target a year on this. It's going to kind of depend on the weather and our work schedule. But this one took almost exactly a year. So we're going to do a little bit of let's call it a lightning round here, because I got a few questions come in after the stories. All right, so I'm going to try to do this in a minute, approximately. Cleaning old caulking off the camper. How do you do it? So I use a product called Goof Off. Squirt it on, take a wire brush, and Goof Off will kind of break the seal, and the wire brush will knock it off. Works pretty well. Tips for putting the sides and the metal back on the camper. So if you're reusing your original siding, what I would recommend is start by positioning it around a window opening or your door or something like that. Something that is kind of centralized, and then work out from there. Don't try to start at the top of a curve and work down, because the curve is not flat. You'll never get it lined up right. Have you ever sandblasted a trailer frame to remove surface rust? No, I haven't. Sounds messy. I don't have a sandblaster. Never done it before. It would probably work pretty nicely. Do you give yourself a deadline or time frame to finish? And if so, what is your personal time frame? I would like to be done in a year, but I would like to be done in the time it takes to do a quality job. What are some of your favorite blogs/resources that may have given you knowledge on the restoration process? I actually follow a lot of woodworking accounts on Instagram, and I use a lot of that knowledge in what I'm doing here. But also, kind of some common sense. Just think through how these are built and rebuild them the way they were, because somebody else already figured out all the details for you. You just need to copy them. Also, mobile tech, you know, and this channel. So thanks for following along. I hope you found this interesting or entertaining. And we'll be off next week because we're going to take a little time to ourselves. And hopefully we're going to come back. We're going to be rested and re-energized and ready to get to work and get this other camper looking like a camper again. So make sure and like and subscribe. New videos come out almost every Sunday. And we'll see you in the next video.